From a trash-talking CEO that just couldn't keep their mouth shut to running it down in scrims all the way to making one of the biggest chokes in league history, these are 8 more times that trash-talk in League's pro play ended up backfiring big time. To kick things off with some seriously high stakes in one of the most recent installments of the long-time G2 vs Fnatic rivalry, just this past year headed into the LEC's 2024 season grand finals, Fnatic's longtime mid laner Humanoid had some pretty unwavering confidence going into the championship match that their ADC Noah didn't seem to fully agree with. While awaiting the results of the lower bracket to determine which opponent they would face off against in the grand finals the following day, after watching MDK secure a 1-0 lead in this best of 5 series, both Humanoid and Noah were called on stage for an interview about their thoughts going into the matchup ahead, and when asked what their thoughts were in regards to these two finals contenders compared to Fnatic's already secured position, well, both players seemed to have competing answers.
I think both teams look really bad. Honestly, I wasn't impressed, and I think tomorrow is going to be a free win.
Do you think your mid laner is a bit cocky?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
I think it's not okay.
Now, while Noah unsurprisingly attempted to keep things calm and respectable, even shouting out fellow ADC Supa's strong misfortune performance in Game 1, clearly Humanoid did pretty much the exact opposite, and after G2 managed to come back with a 3-1 scoreline in their redemption series against MDK, a year later from their previous season finals matchup, both Humanoid and the rest of Fnatic once again found themselves faced off against G2, hoping to finally lift their LEC trophy. But while Humanoid posted a pair of great performances, admittedly doing so by playing an ever-fun stacking Smolder, the longtime LEC mid laner would struggle to get his Corki sufficiently off the ground in games 3 and 4, which in combination with being caught out on the fiery fledgling to conclude an over 50-minute long Game 1, once again Fnatic's mid laner was left with a brutal reality check, a second place finish, and a bitter aftertaste of eating his own words. However, as you may have expected, Humanoid isn't the only mid laner to make this list, as just 3 years prior, Cloud9's then mid laner Perkz got a little ahead of himself in celebrating his team's upcoming Worlds match in the quarterfinals, leading to him being humbled not only on the Rift, but also in the match's post-game interview as well. Though we'll be getting a kick out of some of his G2 and Cloud9 teammates' regrettable actions later on, when it comes to the man in the mid lane himself, Perkz has never been one to shy away from trash talk either on the domestic or international stage, frequently heading into mid matchups by stating that he will smash whoever has to face him, regardless of whether he actually will or not. And while such comments are good enough for throwing out jabs of small banter, if we want to witness some real quality Perkz trash talk, we needn't look any further than his comments heading into the matchup against one of the best mids in the LCK, BDD. After scraping across the finish line in the group stage with a 2-4 record combined with winning a tiebreaker, this Cloud9 roster eagerly awaited their opposition for the next round, and though there weren't going to be any easy matchups, Perkz got a little ahead of himself when it came to his reaction about the draw show's results.
So I'm actually playing against the worst winner in the quarterfinals, guys. So I have to carry us.
While Perkz and Cloud9 somehow came to the coping consensus that this was going to be a free win, especially against the supposed worst mid laner at the tournament, as you probably guessed this wouldn't be the case, as like APA's backfiring in the previous video, not only would the NA 3rd seed lose this series, but they would be crushed in a 3-0 sweep, with BDD's post-game interview hurting this overconfident mid laner even further. You see, when the LCK All-Pro runner-up was asked what his thoughts were on the series, it was clear that he took Perkz' comments personally, as he rightfully clapped back shortly after this victory and stating that he believed Genji's performance as a whole was just average, but it didn't need to be above that since they didn't feel that Cloud9 was very good, which in fairness is pretty much exactly what had been shown by their performance in the 3 games prior, as just like Perkz predicted, the worst mid laner in the quarterfinals did indeed get crushed. But though this Korean cockiness was unquestionably deserved, at least this flame had the results to back it up, which is something that cannot be said about Samsung Ozone's jungler Dandy back in Worlds 2013. While you may already know Dandy from his legendary 5-man Lee Sin kick earlier in this season, headed into Worlds there was no shortage of confidence coming from this 3rd place finisher in the Champions 2013 Summer Split, who stated that during this Worlds, quote, "I don't think there's any way Korea will lose to a foreign team." Now, if we were to put this in the context of recent years in League's international scene, this would be a little bit less of a ridiculous claim, even if it was still pretty bold. However, to say so during this early time period of the game's competitive history was even more absurd, as unfortunately for Dandy, a cruel twist of fate meant that things didn't exactly pan out as he had hoped. Though the irony would only get worse and worse for the Ozone jungler as the tournament progressed, after World's initial group stage, not only had Samsung Ozone lost both of their games to Europe's Fnatic, but they additionally dropped another match against the EULCS representatives in their loss to Gambit Gaming as well, placing these two teams in a tiebreaker match to determine who is to advance and who is going home. And though it was a back and forth banger of a match in which both teams traded blow after blow, ultimately Gambit Gaming would manage to defeat their trash-talking opposition of Dandy and his teammates of Samsung Ozone, though unfortunately for this now eliminated roster, things only got more ironic from there. You see, once the tournament had concluded, outside of SKT trading games 1-1 with China's OMG, Samsung Ozone actually ended up being the only Korean representatives to lose to a foreign team throughout the entire tournament, with Najin Sword only being knocked out by Faker and SKT, who would go on to win their first ever Worlds title. But while this international overconfidence would backfire in a strike of sheer karma for Dandy, at least his prediction was closer to reality than the insane take released by Doublelift just a year prior. Now, when League first launched, the game's primary player base found its footing first in the West, due to the game being released in both North America and Europe in 2009 before being brought to China and Korea in 2011, resulting in Western players for a short while having a leg up on their Eastern opposition. However, though the first ever World Championship in 2011 would unsurprisingly be won by Fnatic partially due to the tournament's Western favored nature, since no teams from either Korea or China had received invitations, it was yet to be proven who would be better in an actual global tournament, something that didn't stop Doublelift from claiming a very premature international victory.
So what happens if League starts to get just as entrenched is the question, right?
It's so hard to just like, oh wow, we have 5 and these guys are going to spend every day playing League of Legends. Like, we've already been doing that for like 2 years or like a year or whatever. So like, they're going to be a year behind forever. No matter what, like, they're going to be a year behind.
To state that Korea and China would be forever a year behind the West was even back then an insane claim, and though Doublelift would understandably receive backlash from both the people in the call with him and through public sentiment, actions do speak louder than words, but even still they're in anything but Doublelift's favor. As of the beginning of this 2025 season, not only has a Western team never won a World Championship since Fnatic's victory back in 2011, but of the 22 international tournaments that have happened since this statement, they have won it all just once, with Doublelift fittingly enough being on the losing end of this singular Western victory. Oh yeah, and when it comes to Worlds throughout the course of his career, Doublelift never made it further than the group stage even once, and for a player who should have had a supposedly permanent 1-year advantage over his opponents, well, that's a result that's less than impressive. But while disrespecting opponents with words is one of the most frequent ways in which pro players try and put down their opposition, leave it to legendary LEC top laner Wonder to find a more creative way of making his disapproval backfire on him big time, with this particular incident taking place in 2021 against notoriously toxic top laner Adam. Now, as we've seen time and time again, Adam has one of the most unique top lane champion pools out there, both in high elo and in competitive play, often bringing out one of his signature gods picks to shake up sticky situations and throw his opponents off guard, something that shortly before being called up to the LEC, G2's then top laner Wonder didn't really seem to respect. You see, though Adam had been called up to Fnatic's starting roster for the team's 2021 summer split, he had spent the first half of his year as a part of K-Corp's dominant lineup in the LFL, competing in the lower division spring season and even winning a title with the organization to cap off an impressive first split. And in being a part of such a promising team, he had the privilege of playing some of the LEC's best teams in scrims, with this particular instance happening against the region's 4-time reigning champions, G2. During one of the K-Corp vs G2 scrim blocks during this earlier part of the season, Adam locked in his signature Olaf pick to kick the draft off in the top lane. However, not thinking that playing against such a strange pick would be worth his while, Wunder instead opted to play Yuumi, taking the game essentially hostage to, ironically enough, avoid wasting his practice time. But while scrim hijinks aren't exactly unheard of in League's competitive scene, especially with Wunder, who is notorious for his abnormal World of Warcraft practice strategies, the G2 top laner likely regretted this disrespectful decision come the summer playoffs, as with the team season on the line, Adam brought out the Berserker in Game 2 of this decisive series. After locking in the fury-fueled Freljordian, and as the teams headed into game, Adam simply typed "No Yuumi, Sag," and delivered an impressive performance on the top lane carry, unstoppably running through his opposition in Game 2 before eventually dunking on G2's chances at victory with his Darius in Game 5, securing himself a world slot in his first split in the LEC, eliminating G2 for the remainder of the season and shutting up one of his biggest critics in the process. And though the long-standing rivalry of G2 versus Fnatic is one that has garnered attention for years in the game's western scene, if we want to look at a team CEO dish out some serious spice only to burn himself on his own words, we needn't look any further than arguably the LCS most historic rivalry between TSM and CLG. Ever since the addition of these two teams into the game's professional scene, conflict became all but inevitable, with these two organizations being built off of the backs of their respective leaders who were once teammates but due to conflicting personalities now served as the other's rival. While this rivalry was initially a heated one that had continually built throughout the passing of each LCS season, eventually TSM's success and growth as an organization began to greatly overshadow the dwindling success of CLG, whose once promising results had now grown less than desirable as their brand slowly began to fade into one of the past, something that TSM's competitive yet egotistical founder Reggie saw as an absolute victory. You see, though Reggie's organization certainly wasn't without its flaws, both their time and success in the region's league scene had garnered the team a massive fan base, lifting several LCS trophies, hosting some of the West's most legendary players, and even securing a massive paycheck in a $210 million naming rights deal with FTX, all of which promising a bright future for this continually expanding organization. So when the TSM CEO was asked in a Q&A thread if fans could trust the organization's ambition moving forward, especially in regards to avoiding the situation of their declining rivals in CLG, Reggie was incredibly bold in his response, saying that he would sell away everything to avoid this same fate, adding on to his ongoing narrative that TSM's brand would never end up absent like this perceived failure of CLG, not as an organization and especially not ever in League. But while TSM's future undoubtedly held promise, Reggie should have probably been more respectful in his variety of times that he dragged CLG's name through the mud, as not long afterwards, things too began to crumble for a seemingly invincible organization. Due to a variety of factors such as FTX's widespread exposure as a fraud, poor LCS results, and esports finances as a whole generally declining from its insane numbers over the past decade, Reggie, ironically enough, found his organization in the same position he had long mocked CLG for years, and as a final crushing blow, even announced that TSM would be leaving the LCS as a whole. Though Reggie had promised that TSM would relocate themselves to a different Tier 1 region and still remain relevant in the league scene, just 2 years after this trash-talking post was made, TSM played their last game of the LCS in the summer of 2023, and is still yet to make a reappearance even to this day. But before TSM collapsed into a broken shell of their former glory, not only did this organization manage to rack up regional titles, but they are also the team behind one of the biggest chokes in League's competitive history, coming in where else but the nail-biting Game 5 of the LCS 2019 Spring Finals. With TSM missing Worlds for the first time in the organization's history during the year prior, the team's off-season restructuring sought to bring this then prestigious organization back to the top of the LCS, and in finishing in 3rd place to close out the regular season, followed by a pair of wins in the quarterfinals and semifinals, things were looking up for this roster, something that was especially the case for their second-year ADC, Sven. A returning player from our previous coverage of League pros eating the bitter taste of their own words, Sven has always been one to call it as it is, and though he had a bit of a rough start to this 2019 spring season, the TSM bot laner had managed to regain his confidence headed into the finals, and during the series opening ceremony, he didn't shy away in letting Team Liquid's Jensen know exactly how he felt about this upcoming matchup.
Put your hands together for Jensen and Sven!
Though this now iconic BM from Sven served as a memorable way to present himself as literally head and shoulders above his competition, the same unfortunately couldn't be said for his gameplay in this series, as despite TSM starting off this final strong with a 2-0 lead, things managed to slip out of their favor in games 3 and 4, with the Danish bot laner not playing particularly great in either the wins or losses, whilst opposition in Jensen continued growing ever more present as the series progressed. And despite TSM having a gold lead and this series in their hands during this all-decisive Game 5, Sven's boldness came back to bite him, as with the severely overconfident misstep, he cost his team everything.
So far, TSM has outmaneuvered Sven. No quick silver sash. He is down. He is shut down.
What is he
now
doing?
On the Baron.
With TSM losing this decisive Game 5 almost entirely off the back of this fateful misstep, Sven's ignorant confidence turned it into a painful comeuppance, as not only did this catch-out let down both his team and teammates by granting Team Liquid the championship trophy, but it also cost TSM a shot at the upcoming MSI, allowing Jensen and the rest of Team Liquid to reach the finals of this international tournament for the first time in LCS history. However, though 2019's MSI remains as one of the greatest examples of LCS international success even to this day, the same most certainly cannot be said about one of the region's biggest letdowns in recent memory, coming just a few months ago in Europe during Worlds 2024's play-in stage. Though NA's trash-talking game has long been dominated by names such as Doublelift, Jensen, and even Jojo Pune, the region's recent revitalization in pre-game flame has been spearheaded by some of its up-and-coming players, with the 2024 season especially bringing forth a new contender in 100 Thieves top laner, Sniper. Being a well-known streaming prodigy who became the youngest player ever to hit rank 1 in Challenger at just the age of 14, Sniper's addition into the LCS during the 2024 spring season seemed all but inevitable, as this beaming personality added a nice touch of banter to the region, even if he said some things that he may have wished he could take back. You see, after pulling off an insane upset over Cloud9's stacked lineup during the season's 2024 summer playoffs, Sniper and 100 Thieves had somehow managed to secure themselves a slot in the world's play-in stage, an incredibly impressive feat for a roster who on paper didn't seem like they should have even made it this far. But though 100 Thieves unfortunately didn't manage to immediately qualify for this tournament's main event due to their 3rd place finish in the LCS Summer Playoffs, they were still solid favorites to make it out of World's initial play-in stage, an expectation that Sniper bet on big time.
I mean, I'm just going to say we already scrimmed against R7, we already scrimmed against Summit's team, and I was doing some things to that guy. I'm just going to put that out there, okay?
I'm looking forward to it.
Definitely not worried about his team.
Okay.
And the team after that, like, if we somehow lose plans, like, I'm actually gonna retire. I'm actually gonna retire from League of Legends.
Don't go, bro.
I'm
All right,
not.
go. You're the...
Bro, 17 years old, I'm gone.
Now, in Sniper's defense, most anyone during this time would have assumed that an LCS 3rd seed shouldn't have any trouble in qualifying for World's main stage, as basically all of the Pool 1 favorites seemed to have clear advantages over their lower seeded opposition. Not to mention that 100 Thieves' first round opponents in R7 were coming from a LATAM league that had never beaten a major region team internationally before, making it seem as if all 4 of the Pool 1 lineups would advance as expected to the tournament's main stage. But while things went as expected for 3 of these 4 lineups, in making international history, not only did Sniper and 100 Thieves lose to underdogs R7 in a shocking 2-1 scoreline, but by dropping into the losers bracket, they were swiftly swept out of the tournament's play-in stage entirely by PSG, resulting in this LCS team being responsible for one of the most disappointing performances in the region's history, and Sniper understandably being absolutely torn apart in this humiliating humbling, which even though he didn't actually end up retiring, he will hear about it for the rest of his career. Consider subscribing if you haven't already done so, or even checking out part 1 of this series as well, since you seem to be enjoying whatever I've got going on here, so yeah, feel free to check those out. But that being said, hope you guys have a great rest of your day or night. As always, I'll catch you in the next video. Later!